sirens, fighter jet engines screaming at full afterburner. Somewhere over the cold, gray waters of the Baltic Sea, Russian nuclear-capable bombers are cutting through the sky, and NATO is scrambling everything it has to meet them. This is not a drill. This is not a Cold War archive clip. This happened in the last 48 hours. And what's happening right now over Europe's northeastern edge could be the opening chapter of something far more dangerous than most people realize. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how close we are to a crossing point that cannot be uncrossed. Let's walk through exactly what happened, step by step. On April 20th, Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that Tu-22M3 Backfire bombers, long-range, nuclear-capable Cold War-era strike aircraft that can carry air-launched cruise missiles or thermonuclear payloads, conducted a 4-hour mission over the Baltic Sea. They were escorted by Su-35 Flanker E fighter jets, Russia's most capable frontline air superiority aircraft currently in service. Russia's state media channel Zvezda acknowledged the obvious, that NATO aircraft shadowed the formation at multiple points along the route. What they didn't advertise is which NATO assets responded. According to open-source analysis and confirmed reporting, French Rafale B jets operating out of Šiauliai Air Base in Lithuania were already at a heightened tempo. Just 3 days earlier, on April 17th, those same French jets had been scrambled to intercept no fewer than 6 Russian aircraft detected approaching the airspace of Latvia and Estonia. 6 aircraft in a single intercept event. That is not routine noise. That is a deliberate show of force, a test of NATO's reaction time, and a message delivered at 30,000 feet. Now let's talk about what the Tu-22M3 Backfire actually represents, because this is not just symbolic. The Backfire is a supersonic swing-wing bomber with a combat radius of approximately 2,400 kilometers, meaning from launch points inside Russia or Belarus, it can threaten targets deep inside Western Europe. It can carry the Kh-22 Burya anti-ship missile, or the newer Kh-32 variant, which cruises at altitudes above 40 kilometers and dives at speeds exceeding Mach 4.6 on terminal approach. That speed profile makes it extraordinarily difficult for most NATO ground-based air defense systems to intercept. Reports indicate Russia has also used Kh-22 variants against Ukrainian ground targets with catastrophic effect. They were not designed for precision. They were designed for mass destruction. The Su-35 escort is equally significant. These are not there to intercept NATO jets. They are there to deny NATO a clean, uncontested engagement window against the bombers. They are a bodyguard force, a statement of intent. Come near these aircraft, and this becomes a combat situation. For NATO, France's Rafale B is a serious asset. Equipped with Meteor Beyond visual range missiles, arguably the most capable BVR weapon currently operational in the Western world, those Rafales had the theoretical engagement tools. But over international waters, under rules of engagement that require extraordinary restraint, theoretical capability and actual authorization are two very different things. And this is where the story takes a genuinely alarming turn. Because the bomber flight did not happen in a vacuum. It happened inside a carefully constructed escalation envelope. On April 16th, just 4 days before the Baltic bomber run, Sergei Shoigu, the head of Russia's Security Council, issued what can only be described as a formal threat against 4 NATO member states. He accused Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania of allowing Ukrainian drones to transit their airspace to strike Russian oil infrastructure near St. Petersburg. Then he invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter. That is the clause covering the inherent right to self-defense. Let that sink in. Russia is using the language of legitimate self-defense to frame potential military action against NATO member states. Shoigu offered what he called 2 possible explanations. Either Western air defense systems are, in his words, extremely ineffective, or these countries are, quote, deliberately allowing their airspace to be used, meaning they are actively complicit in the aggression against Russia. He's built a logical trap. Either NATO is incompetent or NATO is at war with Russia. Both conclusions justify escalation. And then, Foreign Minister Maria Zakharova delivered the warning with chilling bluntness. If the regimes of these countries have any sense, they will heed it. If not, they will have to deal with the response. These are not anonymous online threats. These are statements by senior officials of a nuclear-armed state, directed at NATO members, recorded and distributed through official state channels. Western officials pushed back hard and fast. The European Commission called Moscow's accusations, and I want to be precise here, groundless, and part of, according to their spokesperson, Russia's standard textbook of disinformation. Latvia's defense ministry went further, publicly stating in March that Russia was conducting a large-scale, coordinated information operation across the Baltic region, specifically designed to, in their assessment, discredit NATO, divide local societies, reduce public trust in state institutions, and erode support for Ukraine. Here's the complicating factor, though, the one that makes this messier than a clean narrative. Ukraine itself issued apologies to the Baltic States and Finland after multiple drones went astray during strikes targeting Russian ports. Kyiv attributed those navigation errors to Russian electronic warfare interference. And based on what we know about Russian EW capabilities in the Baltic theater, that explanation is technically plausible. But plausible does not mean provable. And in the information war, Russia doesn't need proof. It only needs a story that sounds credible long enough to shift political will. So what does all of this actually mean strategically? And let's think through it clearly. First, Russia is testing NATO's collective will, not just its military capability. Every bomber flight, every diplomatic threat, every invocation of Article 51 is a probe. How far can Moscow push before the alliance hardens its response posture? So far, the answer has been quite far. Second, the cost asymmetry is brutal. Scrambling Rafale interceptors from Lithuania for a 4-hour shadowing mission burns enormous resources: fuel, flight hours, pilot fatigue, maintenance cycles. Russia can sustain these provocations at relatively low cost. NATO's northeastern flank is expensive to defend at intensity. Third, and this is what keeps defense analysts up at night, the Harvard Belfer Center published a report just this February warning that within the next 3 years, Russia would likely escalate its ongoing gray zone campaign against NATO's northeastern flank, culminating in a limited military incursion. Not a full invasion, a limited incursion, designed to test Article 5's collective defense guarantee in the most agonizing way possible, small enough that some alliance members will question whether it truly triggers a war obligation, large enough that failing to respond destroys NATO's credibility entirely. The backfire mission over the Baltic, the drone accusations, the Article 51 language, according to open source analysis, all of this fits that escalation pattern with disturbing precision. We are watching something that future historians may look back on as a pivotal inflection point, the moment when Russia's gray zone playbook shifted from background noise into active preparation. The Baltic states understand this. They have been warning their Western partners for years, sometimes frantically, that Russia does not distinguish between the information war and the physical war. For Moscow, they are the same campaign. Finland, the newest NATO member, watching its neighbor being publicly threatened by a nuclear power for decisions its government explicitly denies making, is now living the precise security nightmare that drove it to abandon 75 years of military non-alignment. The bombers are back over the Baltic. The threats are on the record. And the next move, wherever it comes from, will define the next chapter of this war. Here is the question you need to be asking right now. If Russia conducts a limited military provocation against a NATO member in the next 12 months, even something small, even something deniable, does Article 5 hold? Does every member of the alliance accept the cost of collective defense simultaneously without hesitation? Because Moscow is betting it doesn't. And everything you watch today, every bomber, every threat, every carefully worded accusation, is Russia taking the measure of that bet. Watch this space, because what happens next could change everything.